Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends, Sam Clement and Courtney Trush. Y'all say hello.
How's it going?
I'm doing fantastically, Sam. Thank you for asking. Courtney, I hope you're doing well.
Yep.
You know, Sam, yesterday Courtney sent us that email talking about something that she had read regarding the ongoing opioid crisis in the United States and whether or not we should consider this an epidemic and what are the impacts for the economy and what can the government do. And my question to you is, Sam, Courtney's onto something here, because that is something that we focus on the Chinese, we focus on the Russians, we focus on illegal immigrants, and here we are in our own backyard. People are dying by the tens of thousands just to get a cheap high.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. I mean, there's obviously not one solution and one person or group at fault, and there's, I don't think, necessarily a quick and easy solution, because I think at times it is a disease, and it's one that, you're right, like, we focus outwards, and I think there's a lot of things going on inwards, even though, I mean, we can talk about it later, but some of the problems probably aren't coming from inside the U.S.
Well, could be. And Courtney, what did you see in that article that you sent us that really kind of triggered your desire to talk about this here today?
Well, John, I was questioning whether or not it was transitory, if this is specific to...
Transitory. Sam, that's
like
a word.
Jay Powell word.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a word that Courtney says that I like a lot.
Yeah, apparently you love that word.
Yes, in case anyone didn't know that you like that word.
It's his middle name.
Just, is it because of COVID? I mean, is that kind of the reasoning of people maybe chasing this high? Is it potentially, we've talked about, we have the highest or a substantial amount of cash in the market. Are people just able to access it because they have the financial means to feed their addictions? So I don't know. I mean, I think that this just seems very timely. And is it something that the government should be proactively addressing? And does that mean that the government is purchasing Narcan or, anti-overdose medicine? Or do they also look, to Sam's point, at who's bringing the drug? Are they being manufactured here in the U.S. or are they getting it from, over the border, and what does that look like?
Well, I'll hit on a couple of topics, and I know Sam has some pretty strong feelings about some of the other ones that you brought up. But Courtney, I would say people historically have always chased the high. I mean, you can go back and even before recorded history and go to archaeological sites, and you can tell that they were making wine or mead or some other type of fermented beverages. And the opioid crisis is just kind of a continuation of that. People searching for a high. However, I would say that this time might be a little bit different, at least in the United States, in the fact that the drugs are so much more powerful now than a glass of mead or a glass of wine, or even when I was coming along. I mean, you talk about potheads when I was coming. Marijuana was considered a kind of a taboo thing, and it's almost widely accepted.
Yeah, there's like drive-thrus now.
Yeah, and so marijuana was a big deal and all that stuff, and we were more focused on beer in college, and heck, at Wake Forest they were selling cigarettes in the dorms. There's no reason to go do all this other stuff, and so that was my experience. But people have always been chasing this high, and generally what it seems to have happened with some of these stronger opioids and with methamphetamines and whatnot, they seem to really take hold and take root in areas where there is economic disenfranchisement. That's a broad stereotype, and that's painting with a very broad brush, because they're rich kids from Beverly Hills, Mountain Brook, all that stuff. They're doing it too. However, where you see the worst of the pandemic is where there is very little economic opportunity, and that's what's concerning to me. That we have a whole underclass of people who just feel so completely out of the loop in our society and our economy that they'd rather take these synthetic drugs to a point where it can be fatal. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that this isn't something new. I think the new part of this is the synthetic ones that you mentioned, specifically fentanyl, which is, I think, now making up over a majority of the overdoses.
Wait, did you say that correctly?
I don't know if I did.
Yes, I think he did. He did.
I think I did.
We made sure.
But no, I mean, that is the new part of this issue. It's been a trend. It's an epidemic. It's not going away. But that's what I think that's what the article is really talking about, is the large majority of overdoses now that are fentanyl. related. I mean, it's just such a strong drug, and I think it's one that is so mishandled. I mean, it's used in medical situations and used appropriately. I think it has a place, but the problem is a lot of the times it's not being used appropriately, and it's coming from places that nobody knows where it's coming from. It's not measured out properly, and it's not used for the right purposes, and that's kind of a dangerous combination.
It's a real dangerous combination, and you have told me that it's coming over the border, Mexico.
I'm sure it's not only coming from Mexico. I'm sure it's coming further south than that through Mexico and maybe other ports as well. But I mean, we seized around 900 pounds just of fentanyl at the southern border.
And you told
me
some ridiculously small amount is a lethal dose.
Yeah, it's that 900 pounds can kill 204 million people, apparently. So that means it's about 0.406 ounces is enough to be a lethal dose. So that's extremely dangerous. And so that was my point about it's, in a medical situation.
It seems like we should be able to weaponize this stuff.
Yeah, in a I guess
that's
so.
That's
we'll talk about that next week. But, in a medical situation, they're measuring that out properly. So if it is 0.0000 whatever, they're measuring that out. But it's hard to imagine people that are using it.
Some dealer on the streets.
Yeah, people that are cutting other drugs with fentanyl are doing it at the appropriate amounts and just that and letting people know what's in it. It's just completely mismanaged, and not that it could ever be properly managed in that situation, but it's just so strong. Like it's hard to imagine ever using that properly outside of a medical situation.
And it's crazy. I mean, guys, it seems as though this stuff is just so widely available.
Yeah.
And why is it widely available?
Well,
is that because it's so easily coming in to the country?
I think that's a part of it.
We're talking about one of them, but we haven't really touched on OxyContin and some of these other ones. Pain clinics. We've seen billboards.
All the documentaries
that's all they are is just legal drug houses. And the Purdue Pharmaceuticals was actively pushing this stuff, and I think really a lot of this started really to make a buck. And that's what's so frustrating for me about that is we have brought a huge chunk of this onto our society because there are people greedy out there trying to make money and just making the painkillers stronger and stronger
and
cheaper and completely lying about the addictive nature to it. And I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theorist, but the more I've read about the opioid crisis, the angrier I get.
Well, it's something, again, going back to this, is something that humans have always searched out, and it's just made it more economical and easier to get. I mean, you talk about pain clinics and the ability. I'm sure all three of us could go and say our back hurts and get a prescription the same day. I mean, it's all you read about is how easy it is.
Well, I mean, you not only get a prescription, you can get on Social Security disability. I got back pain.
Yeah, and it's highly addictive, and so it's.
Do you remember when Coca-Cola first, not to name drop, right? But Coca-Cola, when they first came out, they had actual cocaine in their mixture, right? Which has an addictive quality, and obviously that was deemed not appropriate and was removed from.
You're looking at me as though I remember that.
Back in the day, John. But okay, so y'all touch on a really important point. Is it because yes, you're saying that manufacturers are trying to make a buck. They create something in which there's an addictive quality that it's now killing people.
Yes.
And yet some of these same companies are also making Narcan, which is the overdose preventative medicine, and making a buck off that because now people are all... So they're kind of getting...
It seems like what you're saying is circular.
Yes. They're creating the problem and also solving the problem and winning on both ends of the financial...
Well, this is... that you mentioned Coca-Cola. I mean, there's always been new things coming out. I mean, the Nazis used it in World War II with Pervitin, which was essentially methamphetamine to keep soldiers going up for days at a time. I mean, you look at any documentary, no one realized how quickly they were going to go somewhere that was supposed to take 2 weeks, and they went in 3 days because they were up 24 hours a day.
And stoned.
Yeah, and just up high all the time. And so they were using it for a purpose, and it's kind of transitioned into what it is now.
But I guess my question is, is it the government's responsibility, in your opinion, to step in and either create regulation to prevent the accessibility of some of these drugs, or is it more of that they need to look at the border control, and is there any effect on the market if, one, the government gets involved in limiting, I guess, profitability of some of these companies, or also if they are investing in our military infrastructure on protecting the border, and or I guess if they were just specifically focused on, whatever the agency is about narcotics.
So,
well, the thing is, I mean, there's a tendency for all of us to want the government to go do something.
Right.
I mean, just do something. And our government has gotten very adept at doing something for appearance purposes, but not getting a lot accomplished, in my estimation. And then, of course, that makes me sound like a cynical person, but I guess I suppose I am. Courtney, I would address that by saying, and I mentioned earlier that these things really don't know any particular demographic nor income level, but they do seem to hit the lower income levels a little bit harder than they do the upper ones. I would say the best thing we can do long term, I'm talking about long term solution, is to make this stuff so unappealing to people that they wouldn't even think about doing that. And the best way of doing that is making sure people are enfranchised in our system. And I would argue that educating and training people, making them marketable where they can have money, all of a sudden they're actually thinking about the repercussions. They're thinking about the future. They're not just going from high to high. Now that's my rose-colored glasses, and a unicorn is going to come into the office with a bag of money, and I'm going to be able to retire stinking rich. I get that. However, that's to me more of a definition of success. What the government can do and is actually take education seriously, take training seriously, quit having policies that break up the nuclear family, all of these things that we talk about a lot around here. Those are but huge steps in the right direction. It's not going to solve everything. Where people are always going to be out hitting that high, but I think we could mitigate the worst of this crisis by giving people actually hope for the future.
And you're absolutely right about that being the long-term solution, but I do think a shorter-term solution, and why we've seen the spike go so much higher in the last couple of years, is the access of fentanyl. I mean, you're right. People are always going to find something, and that is a hard problem to solve and a longer-term problem to solve. And you're right in how we do that, and it's make people more enfranchised and just not turn to that as much. It's always going to be an issue.
It's always going to be there.
It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be something. But if we can try our best to take away what's now causing, I think, close to 60% of overdoses, that seems like a short-term solution. That seems like something that we need to do in the short term to get to where we can even fix that long-term solution. And,
so how do we do that?
I mean, I don't have the end-all, be-all answers to, but I mean, if we found 900 pounds of this stuff that could kill 204 million people, it's hard for me to imagine that we found all of it that's coming across.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's...
Do you think so?
Even if...
Oh, gosh, they got our shit.
All of it.
We'll get you back next year.
What I'm getting at is, even if that was 95% of it, that's still millions and millions and millions of people worth of lethal doses that's getting across. So it has to be a part of the solution to me. I mean, we can't ignore that part of it. And I'm not just saying from the southern border. It's probably coming through ports and every which channel it can.
Probably coming in airplanes,
from Europe,
and cargo,
Asia.
all that stuff.
Well, it's not coming in very fast off the ports, as we know. It might be sitting.
There you go, Courtney.
Can
I get a hi-hat on that one, please?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think this is something we have to have short-term solutions to, short-term fixes to get to where we can have long-term solutions.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it all the way out there, and I'm going to go like 5 standard deviations to the right.
Okay.
And say, would we really be willing to do what would be necessary? And that would be to take out these people with extreme prejudice that keep on bringing this stuff over.
It's kind of hard to say yes to that, I think.
I think it is.
Yeah.
The war on drugs has been, I think, inarguably not very successful.
It has not been successful.
I think it's made things worse in a lot of...
a lot of ways it has. But however, the American public really, if we're going to get serious on it, I mean, again, I'm throwing it out there. I'm trying to be devil's advocate.
Right.
Just throwing it out there. Do we really want to win, knowing that would be a definition of success? U.S. military, truly taking out these cartels, truly taking out the mules, truly going into Afghanistan and absolutely turning the poppy fields into seas of glass.
But,
we've got the capability of doing that. We haven't done it because that kind of goes against our sense of fair
right.
play in a lot of ways.
But I almost don't think we necessarily need to. I don't think we're doing enough at not just our southern border, at our ports and everything. I mean, the amount of money we're spending now and the amount of money going to infrastructure, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that the most technologically advanced country in the world with the supreme military power can't do a better job of protecting our borders, all of our borders, from what's coming in than we are doing. So I don't think it necessarily has to go stop it in Afghanistan or wherever it's being created in South America if we do a better job at our actual borders, at our actual ports.
So we might actually be trading perspectives here. I know you're playing devil's advocate, and I will take maybe a different approach in my thought, and this is going to be contradict what we last talked about in my thinking, but I feel like, especially with Mexico, I mean, you talk about quality of life and how people make a living. I mean, the money is in the drug cartels. I mean, and I think a lot of it is their government's lack of ability to be stable and not corrupt and provide opportunities to their own people. So when you sit here and say, okay, well, in the U.S. we need to, maybe push additional education for people so that they are more knowledgeable about, actually having opportunities in life, and how if they do something like this, it could completely ruin that chance. I mean, part of me would want to support Mexico and providing education and helping them help themselves. Again, that goes into Afghanistan and how long, in Iraq and Middle East in general, of us trying to change people. And that's not where we need to spend our money. But, so protecting our borders isn't going to stop their unrest and inability to provide for themselves. So they're always going to be chasing after that money, which the U.S. would provide. So
I just think that money would be better spent protecting our own borders and doing it ourselves.
But you're not addressing the root cause.
I don't think we're going to be able to fix the root cause. I mean, I think that relies completely on the countries where that problem is residing in. I mean, I think we can play a role in it, but I think we can also put our thumb down on them and economically incentivize them to clean things up.
Well, it's not just, I mean, I think we all want something to be done about it. My long-term solution dries up the money flow.
Yeah.
Right.
And that ultimately will kill the supply if the demand goes down. It's just basic economics. However, the war on drugs seems to be focusing on trying to attack the supply and not really doing much about the demand. So anything I think we can do to stifle the demand, whether it's Narcan, whether it's what I was talking about, long-term solutions, I wish there were like some panacea or a silver bullet or whatnot. I don't think there is. I just think, and I think we all think, we're simply kind of sweeping it underneath the rug to some degree because it's kind of unpleasant to talk about, and we don't really want to admit it. It's kind of like the nutty uncle over in the corner. He's here, but we don't need to pay much attention to him. And I resemble that a lot at our family functions.
But
nutty uncle.
It is interesting when we talk about disenfranchisement, and you're absolutely right about it. But for a country that's so prosperous to have such high levels of this compared to other nations, I mean, it's pretty shocking when you compare the levels of overdoses and really any measurement of this hard drug use in our country.
I think, and we've seen the people. You can go to Walmart, you can go to a small town, you can see the people. You didn't used to be able to see people who were drug-addled, but you can see them. Work behind the counter at the Circle K or something like that, and teeth are all out of their mouth and what have you. And it's sad. I mean, it really is. I mean, it is something that we have not done really anything to address, in my estimation. We might have spent billions on it. We haven't done anything to address it.
So, I guess I know wrapping it up, but do y'all think that they're in addressing this, whether it's border control or the government investing in Narcan, being more accessible to all areas of the country? Is there any direct correlation potentially to the market, to seeing, hey, get ahead of this because we know that the government's going to need to address it, or that some entity is going to need to address it? How could this affect the market?
Well, something that people talk about when they're looking at the market and say stocks is what's the total addressable market for it. And this is something that's inarguably massive. There is massive opportunity in this. That's what drives people to be excited about companies, is how big this possible market for their product can be. And this is one, I mean, we've talked about it, it's not going away, but if you are in an area where you can solve a problem that is really never going away, that's a massively profitable area to be in. And it should be profitable. I think there should be incentives for companies to go into that space.
And I would add on to Sam and saying, if we can be productive in this, if we can tackle this, then my goodness, we're going to get literally, according to my estimation, millions of people are going to be more productive. And if they're more productive, they're going to generate higher levels of, obviously, economic activity. They're going to want more out of their lives than just the next high, and ultimately that's virtuous. That's a virtuous cycle for any society. So this for me is something that it's not just as an economist talking to be good. It's also as a human being that we need to do something about this. Seems like we're focusing on a lot of the wrong things when we have so many problems. We're manufacturing problems, and people are offended by the silliest of things when we have our neighbors throwing their lives away.
Yeah.
Debbie Downer.
I was about to say, it's not a very uplifting topic.
And with Thanksgiving coming up, that's kind of a downer topic. But I mean, this is something that we have. Our society has been sweeping underneath. It's the uncomfortable conversation, and we need to be talking about it a lot more because it's expensive, it's unfair, and it's deadly.
Yep.
Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. I always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, where you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more of what we have to say or how we think, please, by all means, go to oakworth.com and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of awesome information. Courtney and Sam, any last words?
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.